So in today's video, we are going to be going through every League 2 club's current manager and debating whether I think they will be sacked or not sacked during this upcoming 2023-24 campaign. If you do go on to enjoy today's video, please make sure to drop a like on there for me. If you could try and hit 90 likes on today's video, that'd be massively appreciated. Subscribe if you are new as well. We are on the road to 8,000 subscribers, so please make sure you are subscribed if you haven't already with that post notification bell on. It's free to do so and it does massively help out. Drop a comment in as well down in the comment section down below. What club do you support and do you think your manager will survive the full duration of this upcoming campaign? Now, there is a lot of competition. There's going to be a lot of expectation on a lot of clubs. In a couple of days' time, we'll be bringing you guys my overall thoughts and opinions on what the expectation should be at every club. And there's a lot of clubs who probably should be challenging for that top 7 this season. And if they don't, they could be parting ways with their manager. Likewise, at the other end of the table, a lot of clubs probably going to be around that relegation battle sort of period. And if they're struggling and looking like they're not going to survive, they may look to finally change their manager and all that sort of stuff. Let's waste no further time though, get straight into today's video. So make sure to drop a like on there for me, subscribe if you are new as well, and let's get into it. Starting out then with AFC Wimbledon manager Johnny Jackson. I personally think he will be sacked during this upcoming 2023-24 season. I think he was really lucky not to get sacked last campaign. I think Wimbledon only finished a couple of places above the drop zone in the end, and I personally don't really rate Johnny Jackson as a manager. I think his football's far too defensive, and with the squad that they had last season, on paper it was a pretty good squad. Now I know they had some injuries defensively last season, but overall, especially since the turn of the year, they were really poor. And I was surprised to see Johnny Jackson not be sacked, to be honest with you. I know you need to trust the process and all that sort of stuff, but they should be looking to get back into League One, and with Johnny Jackson as manager, I simply cannot see them even getting into the top half in this upcoming campaign. So I personally think Johnny Jackson will be sacked. Next up then is Accrington Stanley manager John Coleman. I think this one's pretty easy. I don't think he will be sacked during the upcoming season. Obviously their first season back in League 2 for a while now, obviously relegated last year, and John Coleman's been there for as long as I can remember really. He seems to have a really good relationship with the owners, and I don't think Accrington will be a team challenging for the playoffs in this upcoming campaign. Yes, they've got some good players, but their squad overall isn't the strongest, and I think around mid-table for Accrington, I think even if they're in some sort of relegation battle, I think John Coleman will be the man to get them out of it, and I personally don't think John Coleman will be sacked. Next up then is Barrow AFC manager Pete Wild. I personally think he won't be sacked. Now, there's potential that Barrow will be looking to kick on and maybe try and really get into that top 7, but I think Pete Wild's done more than a good enough job at Barrow. I think he's actually done a really good job at Barrow, so personally I don't think he will be sacked. I think it'd also be pretty ludicrous to sack him. I think if he has a good summer of recruitment, keeps hold of some of their better players, I do think Barrow could certainly challenge or have an outside chance of the playoffs for this upcoming season. Obviously, they've lost Josh Gordon and Patrick Brough as well, 2 key players for them last season, but I think if they recruit well, Barrow could certainly be maybe a surprise package next season, and I don't think Pete Wilder will be sacked. Channel memberships are now cheaper than ever, with Tier 1 costing just 99p. Tier 2 has been reduced from $3.99 a month down to $1.99 a month, and Tier 3 has been reduced from $8.99 a month down to just $4.99 a month. Your support as always is massively appreciated, and the more members that we have, the better the content will be. Enjoy the rest of the video. Moving on then to my team's manager, Mark Hughes, obviously the manager currently of Bradford City. I personally think he won't be sacked during the 2023-24 season. Obviously we had an underachieving season last year. I think anytime Bradford City are not finishing in the top 3 in League 2, it is an underachieving season. Yes, we got to the playoffs and it was progress on the previous seasons, but it was still overall a massive failure for us, and this season we have to get top 3 at the absolute minimum. We cannot go through the playoffs again, because we've shown that Mark Hughes in high pressure playoff games tends to make a mistake, or he certainly did last season with that Banks for Platt substitution. And personally I think because we will be around the top 10 sort of area in this upcoming campaign, I don't think the board will think that it's bad enough to then go and sack him. I think when you've got such a high profile name in Mark Hughes, I think the board will be even more reluctant to sack him rather than just an average manager like Bowyer or Adams, with all due respect. And I personally think Mark Hughes won't be sacked in this upcoming campaign. Next up then is Colchester United manager Ben Garner. I personally think he will be sacked this season. Now, don't get me wrong, he did a really good job at Swindon Town, but apart from that, his managerial career has been nothing short of a disappointment. Bristol Rovers, massive fail. Charlton Athletic, massive massively underperformed, and I personally think with the way that Colchester were spending money in January, if they continue to do that this summer, then they've got to be looking to at least get into that top 12, and I personally don't think Ben Garner will get his Colchester side into the top 12 next season, and I personally think he will be sacked in this upcoming campaign. Next up then is Crawley Town manager Scott Lindsay. I think this is one of the easiest ones on the list, to be honest with you. I think he will be sacked during this season. Their owners at Crawley Town seem to be very happy to sack managers left, right and centre, and while he had a little bit of stability towards the end of the campaign, I think Crawley is certainly one of my favourites for relegation. Their off the field issues are translating slightly on the field now as well, with some of the signings they're making, some of the players they're letting go. I think it's absolutely shocking, and I personally think Scott Lindsay will be sacked in this upcoming campaign. Moving on then to Crewe Alexandra manager Lee Bell. I personally think he will be sacked as well during this upcoming campaign. 3 sacks in a row, in my opinion. I think when you lose a player like Dan Adjei, Crewe now don't have that player who can score something out of nothing, and he doesn't really like at the moment they're trying to replace him. Losing players like Rob McDonald to Harrogate Town is a big concern for me. It tells you everything you need to know really about Crewe's budget. Yes, they've kept hold of Chris Long, but massive injury problems about him. Baker Richardson as well had an injury-rid season last year, and I personally think Crewe will massively underperform this season, and I do think Lee Bell will be sacked as Crewe manager. Next up then is Doncaster Rovers gaffer Grant McCann. I personally think he won't be sacked in this upcoming campaign. I think they need a bit of stability. After Gary McSheffrey and Danny Schofield last season, I think Grant McCann is a proper manager, and while he failed massively at Peterborough United, he did very well at Hull, did very well previously with Doncaster Rovers. Now, I think a lot of their recruitment right now has been overhyped, to be honest with you. I think only a couple of their signings really look good on paper. Some of them I think their fans are massively overrating, while they've probably not really seen many of them play. Obviously, Richard Wood, very experienced. Joe Ironside's a good striker, but apart from that, off the top of my head, I don't really think any of the other signings are too impressive. Obviously, they brought in a couple of youngsters, which I don't really know too much about, but I think Doncaster have got to be getting in that top 7 next season. I think as long as they're around the top 10 sort of area, I don't think Doncaster's board will be wanting to pull the trigger on someone like Grant McCann, and I personally think he won't be sacked. Next up then is Forest Green Rovers. Now, they're the only club on the list who don't currently have a proper manager. Hannah Dingley is currently the caretaker manager there, and for that reason I'm going to put her down to be sacked, because I don't think she will get the full-time job, or I think someone else like them bring a proper first-team manager in who isn't a caretaker, and I personally think that obviously that means then she won't carry on with her job at the moment. Obviously, they had Duncan Ferguson, recently sacked him. I don't know why they've sacked him when pre-season started. I think they'd already started, or it started a couple of days later. It seemed really bizarre to me, and personally, obviously, because she's a caretaker manager, I'm going to have to put her down as being someone who will be sacked in this upcoming season. Next up then is Gillingham manager Neil Harris. I personally think he won't be sacked as well in this upcoming campaign. Now, the first half of last season was terrible for Gillingham, but then when they recruited well in January, once they got the takeover, Neil Harris proved that he can do really good things with his side now. They were much better at home than away from home. They've spent a lot of money as well so far this summer. You know, you see the sort of paychecks they offer Johnny Williams as well on a long-term contract for someone who's nearly at the wrong side of 30, when you compare that to Bradford City, bringing in Alex Patterson on a lot less wages, much better player, and someone not as injury prone. You compare it from that point of view, I think Gillingham, while they're recruiting well, I think they still need to get a couple more players in a couple key positions. Now, I certainly think Gillingham will have more than enough to challenge for the top 7 next season. In fact, I do think they will make the top 7 at this moment in time with the way all the teams are recruiting. But I personally think if they're in the top 7, I don't see a reason why they would be sacked. So I'm going to put Gillingham down to not be sacked. Neil Harris is... You know what I'm trying to say. Neil Harris won't be sacked from Gillingham in this upcoming campaign. Next up then is Grimsby Town manager Paul Hurst. Now, this one might be unpopular, it might be controversial, but I think he will be sacked in this upcoming season. With the way Grimsby have recruited, I've been very impressed with their recruitment. I think they should be challenging for a top 7 place this season. I think their squad now is more than good enough to make into the playoffs, and I'm not sure Paul Hurst is the man to do that. Obviously, he had a very good spell with Shrewsbury. Apart from that, has struggled really recently in his managerial career, and I know he's a popular figure at Grimsby Town, but I think he is going to underperform with his side, who should be challenging for the top 7 next season. Yes, there's a lot of competition, but Grimsby's squad now looks very good. Bringing back Charles Vernham as well, I think was a brilliant signing. I personally think Paul Hurst will be sacked though in this upcoming campaign. Next up then is Harrogate Town manager Simon Weaver. He's been there for like 13 years. There's no chance Simon Weaver will be sacked. I think even if Harrogate got relegated, I don't see a reason why Weaver would be sacked. I'm pretty sure his dad's the owner or the CEO, something like that. So I think it's almost 100% guaranteed Simon Weaver will not be sacked in this upcoming campaign. Next up then is Mansfield Town boss Nigel Clough. Now, this one was a little bit tricky for me. I've in the end decided to think that he won't be sacked in this upcoming campaign. I think Mansfield, it's do or die for them really. If they don't go up this season, I don't see how they ever get out of League Two. They're slowly becoming a team who seem to be like they're in League Two forever, to be honest with you. I know they had their injury problems last season, but it was still a season of underperformance. Their recruitment so far has been solid, obviously bringing in Billy or Bailey Cargill from Forest Green Rovers. I personally think he's a really good signing. Callum McDonald as well at left back for cover, while Stephen McLaughlin is currently recovering from injury, and I personally think Nigel Clough will get his side at least into that top 7 next season, and I don't think he will be sacked in the 23-24 campaign. Next up then is recently appointed MK Dons manager Graham Alexander. Now, I think there's going to be a lot of expectations on MK Dons to get back up into League One at the first time of asking. I think they've got to be at least in that top 7 with some of their players. I know overall last season they underperformed, but having players like Mo Isa in League 2 is an absolute cheat code. I personally think Graham Alexander will be sacked though as MK Dons manager. I think he's going to really underperform with his squad. There's going to be a lot of expectation for them to get back up into League 1 at the first time of asking, and I don't think they're going to be able to do it. I think Alexander will be sacked, probably one of the first managers to be sacked as well, in my opinion. I think they'll have a really slow start. First 10-12 games, I personally think Alexander will be sacked in. Next up then is Morecambe manager Derek Adams. Now, I don't think he will be sacked because right now they simply can't afford to sack him. Now, obviously, if they have the takeover and their owners want to bring a different manager in, potentially from that point of view, he could be sacked. But with the state of Morecambe Football Club right now, I don't see a world in which Derek Adams is sacked because they simply can't afford him. And obviously, he did a really good job with them last time they were in League 2. He managed to get them promoted. Yes, obviously, he's now got the relegation on his CV, and they've got a really small budget. I think they'll be towards the lower end of the table at this moment in time, but simply because they can't afford to, I don't think Derek Adams will be sacked in the upcoming campaign. Next up then is Newport County manager Graham Coughlin, and I personally think he will be sacked in this upcoming season. Everything at Newport just seems to be a little bit stale. They haven't really challenged for the playoffs in a couple of years now, and I personally think they're going to be looking to push on. I don't think Coughlin's the man. I don't really rate him as a manager. Massively underperformed at Mansfield Town, and personally I think Graham Coughlin will be sacked as Newport County manager this season. Next up then is Knox County manager Luke Williams. I don't see a world in which really he does get sacked, to be honest with you. Did an unbelievable job with them last season. Yes, they've got a big budget. Yes, they've got some really good players, but what is the point in having good players without a good manager? Luke Williams is one of the best managers in League 2 for me, and I personally think there's no chance that he will get sacked. I think Knox County should get the top 7 next season, but even if they're just around that top 10, they're sort of challenging for it. I don't see a world really where Luke Williams would ever get sacked, in my opinion. Next up then is Salford City manager Neil Wood, and I personally think he will be sacked in this upcoming season. Gary Neville and the people behind the scenes at Salford seem to be really trigger happy with sacking managers, and while Neil Wood did a decent job with them last season, obviously I think they finished 7th in the end, it was still a season of underperforming for Salford City because they didn't get promoted. They got probably the biggest budget in the league, probably top 3, that's for sure, and I don't think they're going to get the top 7 next season. I think there's a lot of better squads out there at the moment. I think there's better managers out there at the moment in this league, and I don't think Salford will make the top 7, which will eventually see Neil Wood be sacked, in my opinion. Next up then is Stockport County manager Dave Challoner. Now, recently signed a new 3-year contract with the football club, and I think he's very secure in his job. I don't see a world in which really he will be sacked. They'll be looking to kick on, obviously, first season back in League 2, finished 4th, got to the League 2 playoff final, losing out on penalties in the end, and personally for me, I don't see a world in which where Dave Challoner gets sacked. I think for now, Stockport will probably be my top 2, if not top 3, for my League 2 table predictions. They'll be coming out at the end of the month, but personally, I don't see a world in which Dave Challoner does get sacked. Next up then is Sutton United manager Matt Gray. Now, personally for me, again, I don't see a world in which Matt Gray gets sacked, to be honest with you. I think the job that he's done to get Sutton into the Football League has been brilliant. He's been challenging for the playoffs, so I have an outside chance of the playoffs with 5 or 10 games to go over the last couple of seasons, and yes, they've fallen off towards the end of the season, but I think he's been one of the better managers who's overperformed compared to the budget over the last couple of seasons, and I don't see a world in which Matt Gray does get sacked, in my opinion. Next up then is Swindon Town manager Michael Flynn. I personally think he will be sacked in this upcoming campaign. Swindon's fans, they're going to have the expectations of wanting to get back into that top 7, and I don't think Michael Flynn is the man. Their recruitment so far has been, well, lackluster. You know, they've not really done much recruitment so far, and I think Michael Flynn, while he did well in periods at Newport. He massively underperformed at Walsall, and I think he has to get this right with Swindon Town. I don't think he is, and I think he will be sacked in this upcoming campaign. Moving on then to Tranmere Rovers manager Ian Dawes. I personally think he will be sacked in this upcoming campaign. I think the expectation at Tranmere will be a top 3, top 7 finish, and I personally don't think he is the man to deliver that for them this season, and he's pretty short and sweet to say about Ian Dawes. I don't really know too much about him, to be honest with you. I think he was either their assistant manager or under-18s manager. I think they're promoted from within, and I personally don't think he is going to be the man to get Tranmere Rovers back playing League One football again in the 24-25 campaign, and I personally think he will be sacked. Next up then is Walsall manager Matt Sadler. I think, again, another manager who will be sacked, in my opinion. Promoted from within, again, similar to Ian Dawes, and again, I think it ends with a similar outcome. I do think he will be sacked during this campaign. I think, again, the expectation at Walsall probably is a top 7 finish next season, and I don't see a world in which currently their squad or their manager get them into that top 7, so I personally do think he will be sacked. They need a bit of stability at Walsall, but I don't think Matt Sadler is the man to take them forward. And the final team on this list, if you couldn't tell, I've obviously gone through in alphabetical order, is Wrexham AFC. Phil Parkinson is their manager, obviously former Bradford City manager. Again, similar to Luke Williams at Knox County, I don't see a world in which Wrexham are go out and sack their manager. I think he's got a really good relationship with the fans, and obviously did an unbelievable job last season to get them promoted and obviously win the title. Yes, they've got a massive budget. Yes, they've got comfortably the best players in the league, and they've probably got the best squad in the league again this season. And they'll probably have one of the best squads if they get into League One as well. But on paper, for me, I don't see a world in which Phil Parkinson gets sacked. I think Wrexham will comfortably get into the top 7 next season, in my opinion. Obviously, when you've got a striker like Paul Mullin who scores goals for fun, that certainly does help, but I don't see a world in which Phil Parkinson does get sacked. If I'm right in saying, I think I've got 12 managers out of the 24 to be sacked then in this upcoming campaign. It can be before, during, or even a couple of weeks after the season as well. But that is where I'm going to leave it for today's video. If you have enjoyed, please make sure to drop a like on there for me. If you could try and hit 90 likes, as I said at the start of today's video, that'd be massively appreciated. Subscribe if you are new as well. We are on the road to 8,000 subscribers, so please make sure you are subscribed if you haven't already, with that post notification bell on. It's free to do so, and it does massively help out. Drop a comment in as well down in the comment section down below. Let me know which team you support, and do you think your manager will be sacked in the upcoming 2023-24 campaign. Thank you very much for watching today's video. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all very soon for another one. Peace.